high-flying adventures, high-tech gadgets, and a bad case of gerontophobia. Today on Spider-Fan. Hello, my webbed wonders, and welcome to another fantastic episode of your friendly neighborhood Spider Fan, the podcast that combines saving faith and spider fandom. Brought to you by Geek Devotions, a network of podcasts of devoted geeks who are devoted to letting you know that you are loved. That's right, if you don't listen past this moment, know this. God loves you. He has a plan for you. There is a purpose for your life. Do not give up. I'm excited to finally be coming back to you today after an unintended long hiatus. I hope you enjoyed the episodes where I was able to sit down with the OG Spider Fan, my dad, and do a review of the first few episodes of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, the new animated show on Disney+. I've taken a little bit of a break from the podcasting world to spend some time with family, get some things done, but now we're getting back into the swing of a normal routine, and I'm able to sit down and actually spend some time reading some comics. And I am finally getting back to Amazing Spider-Man number 2. And I gotta say, I've been excited to talk about this one for several reasons. Amazing Spider-Man 2, of course, was written by Stan Lee with art drawn by Steve Ditko and with the lettering done by John Duffy. And what's very special about Amazing Spider-Man number 2 is this is where we get introduced to two of Spider-Man's villains, one that's pretty well known and one that we don't see a whole lot of except for special things. The first one is the Vulture. That's right, Adrian Toomes himself. Fans of Spider-Man Homecoming will recognize this villain, although that version was slightly different than what we get here. The first page of the comic is this amazing action shot of Spider-Man and the Vulture fighting high over the city, and Vulture's got his wings spread out and Spider-Man's got his fist raised up, and it really is a high action moment. But what I found interesting in this particular issue, several things actually. One is this is where we get the trope of Peter Parker using his Spider-Man abilities to take pictures to sell to the newspaper, because he's able to scale walls and do things and go where other people can't. He's able to get pictures that other people aren't able to get. And Jameson is willing to pay for pictures of this Vulture, this bird-themed thief who keeps stealing people's jewelry and briefcases and things like that. My hat's off to Steve Ditko's design of the Vulture, because the guy looks like a giant vulture. He really does. And that really plays into this odd, creepy art style that Steve Ditko has. And when I say creepy, I don't mean that as an insult at all. I think this is one of the reasons he was also so good for Doctor Strange, is he draws stuff that just seems kind of weird and out there. And so to have a villain that looks like a vulture, the way he draws the Vulture's face, I mean, I get why he makes him an old man, because that makes him look vulture-ish. But I find it interesting that he chose to make him an old man instead of giving him a mask that looks like a vulture. I thought that was an interesting decision. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, I'm so used to the Vulture being the way he is now and seeing all the different iterations, but what was it like for Steve Ditko to sit down and say, okay, I got to come up with this bird-themed villain. What's that design going to look like? And he doesn't put him in a mask. He doesn't give him flight goggles. He says, I know, I'll just make him old and crony like a vulture. And so it really makes me wonder what went through his mind. But anyhow, the Vulture's performing these robberies, and Jameson says he's willing to pay for pictures of the Vulture. And Peter Parker gets an idea. He borrows his Uncle Ben's old camera, and he says, I'll take pictures of the Vulture. I'll use my abilities as Spider-Man to take pictures of the Vulture, sell them to the Bugle, and that's going to help with Aunt May's rent, with the situation. And I gotta say, kudos to the character of Peter Parker for taking his position as man of the house seriously. He's not just sitting on his bum. He recognizes, okay, my aging aunt is trying to take care of me, And with Uncle Ben being gone, he was the breadwinner of the house. He's not there anymore. I need to do something to contribute. I need to help out in some way. So instead of being the man baby that just sits on his couch, and I don't know if they had video games like that back in the 60s, but, just sits on his couch and does nothing. He's like, no, I'm going to get up and do something, and I'm going to contribute. So he decides to take pictures. It's interesting because his first encounter with the Vulture, he's not actually trying to stop him from a robbery. He's just trying to take a picture so he could sell the photo to the Bugle. But he ends up in a water spout, which I think is funny, the itsy bitsy spider poem and all of that. But what's really cool, what really stands out to me about this issue is that we see Peter Parker's scientific intelligence. After his first encounter with the Vulture, he figures out that the Vulture's flight abilities have to do with magnetism. And so he designs a device that's going to neuralize the Vulture's abilities. We also see him design his utility belt, which is the utility belt that can be seen in the 77 Spider-Man, for those of you who have seen it. He actually does have a utility belt. It's just usually underneath his costume instead of on top of it. But he designs the utility belt. He designs extra cartridges for his web shooters, because this is where we get introduced to the idea that, his webbing runs out. And we get this idea that's one of the things that Stan Lee always did was, hey, he's a regular guy. Sometimes he's going to go to shoot a web line and there's not going to be webbing in the cartridge. So we see that trope come into play here. There's a great moment that I'll talk about in a little bit, where Peter sneaks off to change into Spider-Man to fight the Vulture, and Flash and the other kids think he's just a scaredy cat who wants to run away. But we all know that's not what's really going on. What's really going on is Spider-Man is that Peter Parker is becoming Spider-Man. So we have this epic rooftop battle where Spider-Man and the Vulture are fighting, and he makes use of this device that he's made. He outthinks the Vulture and causes him to lose his flight ability. And then we see Peter selling his photos to the Bugle and giving money to help Aunt May. It's one of the few times that we see Peter actually on top of the world and things working out for him. And it was a really neat story. I enjoyed going back and reading it again. But this is where we get the idea that Peter uses his spider abilities to take odd pictures that other people can't get. And we see just how much of a scientific genius he is. And he can, with a couple of spare parts from Radio Shack, he's able to put together something that defeats a supervillain. And that's one of the things I've always found interesting about Spider-Man is his ingenuity, his ability to come up with stuff on the fly. I mean, he's got the brains of a guy like Tony Stark or Reed Richards, but he doesn't have their funding. He doesn't have their resources. All he has is just his know-how. And I dare say that makes him a better superhero, because he doesn't have all the stuff. He doesn't have all the fancy gadgets and the resources. He's got what he can scrabble together at home, but he's able to do that and be the hero. All right. Second story of Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the uncanny threat of the terrible Tinkerer. Now, honestly, reading the comics growing up, I didn't read a lot about the Tinkerer. He'd show up every once in a while. He would design weapons and things for some of the supervillains. I know that the first time I saw Black Cat, she had a set of earrings that gave her an uncanny sense of balance that she got from the Tinkerer, because she had decided she wanted to turn into a hero and help Spider-Man fight crime, but she needed superpowers, so the earrings kind of helped her do that. So I'd heard of him kind of there, and I'd seen iterations of him on some of the animated series. Like, I know he was in the Spectacular Spider-Man series for a couple of episodes, and of course, they had a version of the Tinkerer in the Miles Morales Spider-Man game, which I actually really liked. I thought that was a neat take on the character. But I have to chuckle because once again, the villain is an old man. I don't know if Stan Lee and Steve Ditko were on a fear the old man kick right now, because they were probably young men themselves when they were drawing this. But I found it interesting that it was an issue full of the villains being older men. We see Peter's scientific genius. He gets a job or an internship with a scientist working in his lab. and he takes a radio to be fixed at the Tinkerer's repair shop, and we come to find out that the Tinkerer is really helping an alien invasion happen. He's putting listening devices in all of the VCRs and radios and TVs of like politicians and scientists and things, so that the aliens can listen in on the conversation that's happening and find out a good time to invade the Earth. I've got to say, this is the first time where we see Peter play the hero simply because he wants to be the hero. In Amazing Fantasy 15, the only truly heroic thing he does is chase Uncle Ben's killer. And I mentioned before about how I actually think that up until the moment he takes responsibility for his uncle's death, we're seeing the origin of a supervillain. But he turns hero last second. In Amazing Spider-Man #1, he's just trying to get a job. I mean, the whole reason he fights the Chameleon is because he's trying to get money to help his Aunt May. And then he, of course, saves John Jameson from the spaceflight problem. But even that is kind of, I don't want to, but it's what's expected of me, so I have to. He still has this chip on his shoulder of, I didn't act when I was supposed to, and now something bad happened. In the first story with the Vulture, he's trying to help his Aunt May with the bills. So yeah, he takes a picture of the Vulture, and yes, he stops the Vulture from committing the crime of the robbery, but his primary goal is still, I've got to make money, I've got to help out. He's not trying to be a superhero, really. This is the first story where he actually acts heroic. Like, there's nothing that really compels him to go check out what the Tinkerer is doing other than just something's off and I feel like I need to step in and do something. So he puts on a Spider-Man costume and goes and fights the aliens. That's the first time that he does something truly, truly superhero-ish, in that he's not motivated by something else. Like, he doesn't get anything directly out of trying to stop these aliens. He's just doing it, which I think is neat. So we have this big fight with the aliens. The Tinkerer supposedly dies in the fire, but then Peter Parker has a mask, so I guess that wasn't the Tinkerer's real face. So honestly, I don't know much about the Tinkerer. So if any of you people out there want to comment and maybe fill me in on some of the Tinkerer's history, maybe some good issues to read to learn more about the Tinkerer, drop them in the comments and let me know. I'd love to learn more about this villain. And that is Amazing Spider-Man #2. All in all, a great episode. Like I said, I'm a fan of the classics. I love these old 60s comics. And Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, they had something special going on that really was something amazing to behold. And I'm having so much fun going through and reading some of these and trying to capture some of the essence of what was going on back then. And I hope you are too as we go through it. All right, guys, get set because my spider sense is tingling. Welcome to Spider Sense Tingling, the portion of the show where we take what we've discussed about with the Spider-Man comic and give it some spiritual significance. And what I want to talk about specifically is a moment in the first story where Spider-Man's fighting the Vulture. There's a scene where the Vulture has told the police, I'm going to steal, I think it's some bonds or some money or something. He's basically said, yeah, I'm totally going to steal it and you can't stop me. And so a crowd has gathered to try to watch the thing happen and also to see if Spider-Man's going to show up to stop him. And there's a panel where Peter is in the crowd watching everything, and Peter thinks to himself, I'd better make myself scarce. If I have to change to Spider-Man, I won't be able to do it in the middle of this mob. And Flash, looking back and seeing Peter skulk away, says, look, gang, little Petey is chickening out. Guess the excitement is too much for his delicate little self. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating because as the reader, we know Peter isn't chickening out. If anything, he's getting ready. He's looking for a place where he can change into a Spider-Man costume so he can fight the Vulture. But to everyone else, it looks like he's slinking away. It looks like he's getting scared and walking away. And I find it interesting that Peter doesn't correct Flash, doesn't speak to Flash, doesn't seem to even acknowledge that Flash is there. He turns around and he walks off. He's not concerned about how he looks. He's not concerned that he looks like a coward. All he cares about is the mission. He knows the Vulture is about to rob this bank, and he says, "I've got to go. I've got to stop this robbery. I've got to get a picture of the Vulture so I can sell it to the Bugle, so I can help provide for Aunt May." He is focused on his mission, and he's doing what he needs to fulfill that mission, and he doesn't really care about how it makes him look. He's not concerned about the opinions of others. He's concerned about what the right thing to do is. And that reminded me of a verse, Galatians chapter 1, verse 10. It's Paul writing to the church in Galatia, and he says, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." So basically, the church in Galatia is having an issue with a group called the Judaizers. And basically, these are people who were teaching that if you're going to become a Christian, you have to be a practicing Jew first. Jesus was a Jewish Messiah, and because he was a Jewish Messiah, you have to convert to Judaism before you can be a Christian. That means circumcision, following all the laws, keeping all the feasts, keeping all the extra commandments, everything. And Paul is writing against that, saying, no, that's not right. That's not why Jesus died on the cross. And he brings up this point. He's saying, look, we're not trying to tickle the ears of people. We're not trying to give you something watered down or something not of God that's more palatable for you. We're speaking the truth. If we were trying to please men, we wouldn't be a servant of Christ. Now, that reminds me of this situation because just like Paul is solely focused on his message that he's trying to teach the Galatians, and he doesn't really care whether it looks like how it looks like. He's not trying to please men. He's speaking the truth. Well, that's where Peter was in the situation too. All he cares about is getting in a Spider-Man costume and doing what he needs to do. He doesn't really care about how it makes him look. And I think that's very, very convicting for us as Christians, especially today, because being a devout follower of Christ sometimes means you're going to have unpopular opinions. It sometimes means that your view of circumstances and situations is going to make you stand out in a crowd, and not in a way that's very flattering. They might make fun of you, or they might call you names, or they might do worse. But the idea is because you follow Jesus, you look different to the world, and the world notices, and they don't always appreciate those differences. But just like Peter doesn't care, he doesn't care about how he looks, whether or not he looks like a coward. He cares about becoming Spider-Man and stopping the Vulture. Just like Paul doesn't really care if his message pleases men or not. He's not working to serve to please men. He's serving God. In the same way, that's how we need to be as we walk out our faith. We don't need to concern ourselves with, how does this make me look? Does this make me have more friends? Does this make me more popular? Does this help me to be in line with the group of people that I want to be in line with? Or is it a simple matter of, this is what the Lord says. This is what the Bible teaches. This is what, as a follower of Jesus Christ, I'm expected to do. And I think that we can learn that that's a lesson we need to learn, is that we need to be concerned with what our mission is to God and not fixate on how it makes us look to others. It's about seeking the Lord. And if we look cowardly, or if we look hateful, or if we look judgmental, or if we look some other way to other people, well, so be it. If I'm following Jesus, that's all that matters. Now, this doesn't give us an excuse to be a jerk. This doesn't give us an excuse to be rude, but it does mean that at the end of the day, our primary concern isn't what people think about us. It's about what our mission is. And our mission is to serve the Lord and to seek after him and to make his name famous. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I promise it won't be as long before my next episode. I'm going to continue my walk through the classic comics, but I also had an idea to, after watching Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man with my dad, I also had an idea to review some of the old school Spider-Man movies, particularly the Maguire ones. So I'm kicking around the idea of doing that. Leave me a note in the comments. Tell me, would you rather me keep going with the classic comics, or would you want me to take a look at some of the movies, or maybe even some of the old animated series? Let me know what you'd like me to do. Be sure to check out all of our stuff on all of our socials and interact with us, especially in Discord. And until next time, keep your web shooters full, your spider sense alert, and your eyes always on Jesus.